Hi everyone, this is my Cinderella book presentation. I went ahead and found these three Cinderella books from different cultures that represent the story of Cinderella. We're just going to go ahead and start with Cinderella. The cultural setting in this book was a Caribbean setting. Throughout the book, it is filled with beaches, palm trees, and obviously gorgeous blue waters behind them with Caribbean people. The time period of this book, it does not specify a specific time period. I even looked it up and I couldn't find one, but from the illustrations, it looks like it may have been from a long time ago. Who is Cinderella in this story? Cinderella is Cinderella. She represents Cinderella in this story. A little bit about her. Her mom died shortly after giving birth to her. Her father remarried shortly after her mom's death, and together they had another child. The new wife immediately treated Cinderella like a slave, making her wait on her hand and foot, making her do all sorts of chores around the house, and the word Cinderella actually means Cinderella in Caribbean. What represents the gown and how does it represent the gown? So let me go to the page where she has her gown. Here's this one. There are several features attached to Cinderella's gown. The book is specific about the detail of her gown and what it's made out of. It describes her dress as a bold sky blue velvet color. And I liked how it was blue like the original Cinderella story. The cultural reference is that she matched her dress with a blue turban, as you can see right here, which represented a crown that graces the head to draw attention to the beauty of the woman wearing the scarf. The head wrap can serve as an indicator of one's social status, style, and wealth. Nanan, which is right here, this was Cinderella's godmother. She wanted her to look perfect for this upcoming celebration, and she did. She gave Cinderella beautiful gold jewelry, as you can see, necklaces, bracelets, and she looked very lovely. What represents the shoe? Cultural revealance. The shoe is described as an elegant pink slippers that are embroidered with roses on them. Looking through the book, everyone wears slippers or slipper type shoes. Here you can see on this page here, there's like shoes all over the ground here, and they're all flats. None of them are wearing heels. I looked up a cultural reference to this, and slippers are a popular choice to wear in Hawaii and on the Caribbean islands, which is why it makes sense that Cinderella wore the slippers and she didn't wear a heel type shoe. Who represents the stepmother? Her name is Madame Prosperine, if I'm saying that correctly. She is right here. She is holding her new little baby. She is described as a cold and puffed up, proud woman because her grandfather came from wealth. He came from France, and she threw lavish parties for her other rich friends and acted like she was better than everybody else, kind of like the original Cinderella story. What or who represents the prince? The prince's name is Paul in this story. Here he is right here, Prince Paul. He came from wealth. The book describes him as handsome, well-spoken, kind. Looking at his home where the ball was held, it was actually his birthday. It's a gigantic mansion that sits upon the coastline right there, against the Caribbean waters. And what or who represents the magic? Nanan, right here, actually on the front cover, she has a special wand that was made out of mahogany that her mother left her for her when she died. She uses this wand to turn ordinary things into extraordinary things. The cultural reference, I looked this up, of mahogany is that mahogany trees are native to warm climates such as the Caribbean. And they were sought after because they are strong, dense wood that was suitable for many applications, featuring swirling grains and vivid hues that could be manipulated to achieve various aesthetic effects. So mahogany is a strong type wood, and with this she could turn anything she wanted to into whatever she wanted to. What or who represents the fairy godmother? Nanan, which was Cinderella's godmother. She was an ordinary washerwoman who loved Cinderella like her own child. She helped raise her. Whenever Cinderella's mom passed away, she would do anything for this child. She loved her very much. What is the ball? The ball in this book was a celebration for Prince Paul. It was his birthday. Caribbean islands have strong cultures for music and dance, which on this page specifically, you can see everybody is dancing and having a great time. Yeah, here they are all dancing. Illustrations. How has the illustrator represented the culture through the use of art elements? So something that I noticed throughout this book is that the illustrator used thick and bold lines in his drawings throughout the book. He used a variety of beautiful and vibrant colors too, which represents Caribbean culture. I've been to a few Caribbean islands myself, and that was something that I noticed, was that their houses are painted these vibrant, bright type colors. They're beautiful. The Caribbean is famous for it. It's actually very pretty. Also, how do the illustrations support the literary elements? So the author uses illustrations to support literary elements by attractively portraying the actions or characters of the story. These pictures gradually help in developing the story and indicating the plot for the readers to understand it properly. I think he did a wonderful job on drawing like their facial expressions throughout, whether they're sad, mad, angry. Here's a stepmother trying to put on her daughter's shoe, and she obviously can't get it on, so she's angry. I think this is a wonderful representation of the story Cinderella. This is a great book. On to the second book. I found this one. It is called The Rough Face Girl. The cultural setting in this one, this book is set in a Native American village that has several wigwams, which are houses that people live in, which I guess everybody probably knows better as a teepee. It says that they live on the shores of Lake Ontario. And here's a picture from the very, very beginning of the book of their wigwams set right there against the lake. The time period of this book, it mentions that it says long ago. That's what the time period was. Guessing, Native Americans being up by Lake Ontario, it was probably in the 1660s, maybe 1670. That's when the Native American tribes were established by, there were 3 tribes that were established up there, the Senecas, Cayugas, and Onitas. I believe I'm saying that right, hopefully. Okay, and who is Cinderella in this story? So Cinderella, it never gives her a name throughout this book. She is referred to as the Rough Face Girl. She's given this name because her evil older sisters torture her by making her sit next to a fire to feed the flames, and when it's burning, branches are popping and sparks were falling onto her hands and her face and her arms. Her beautiful long black hair hung ragged and charred because of the fire. The older sisters gave her this name, Rough Face Girl. They made her feel lonely and miserable. They were terrible to her. But Cinderella, or the Rough Face Girl, was still a kind and gentle girl, even though she was bullied by her older sisters. What represents the gown, and how does it represent the gown? So in this story, or in this book, let me find the page here. The rough-faced girl asks her father for a new buckskin dress and some moccasins so she can go meet the invisible being. Her father didn't have anything of value to give to her except some broken shells and his old, worn, cracked, and stretched out pair of moccasins. She ends up stripping birch bark from dead trees, making a cap, dress, and leggings. She carved in the bark pictures of the sun, moon, stars, plants, trees, and animals. This birch bark dress represents the gown because it is presenting herself to the invisible being so she can later marry him. What represents the shoe? So in this book, there is actually no glass slipper or heel or whatever of significance. It's not like the rough-faced girl or Cinderella loses her shoe and then the prince later finds her shoe and gives it to her and whatnot. This book does not have anything like that. What or who represents the stepmother? There's no evil stepmother in this one either. It is just her two older sisters, like mentioned earlier, that torture her and bully her. They picked on her so bad that they have disfigured her physical appearance. Like I said, her arms, her face, her hands, her hair. They thought really highly of themselves. In here you can see them kind of boastfully and pridefully walking around. They thought they were better than everybody else. They thought for sure that they were going to be the ones who, or one of them was going to be the one to marry the invisible being, which is kind of like the prince in this book. They, like you can see here, the way they're walking, they think really highly of themselves. And like I said, they're boasting around and prideful. They had asked their father for the finest buckskin dresses and beaded moccasins so they could present themselves to this invisible being. What or who represents the prince? So the prince does not have a name in this book. He's just referred to as the invisible being. We do not see him until the very, very end of the book. Here, I'll get to that picture here. But he resides inside a wigwam. He resides inside a wigwam with painted pictures on it. He is described in the beginning of the book as a great, rich, powerful, and handsome being. Many women wanted to marry him, but his sister, in the beginning of the book, she says the only one that can see him can marry him. What or who represents the magic? So there's no magic in this book either, like with a wand or any type of like fairy godmother. But however, when the rough-faced girl answers the invisible being's sister's questions correctly, he ends up appearing, like as you can see right here. Nobody could see him but her. He ends up appearing, and she can physically see him. He tells her to then bathe in the lake right here, where suddenly all her scars vanished from her body. It says her skin grew smooth again, and her beautiful black hair grew and long and glossy. And I looked up the cultural reference of, water with Native Americans. In Native American culture, water is thought to have a cleansing power. It symbolizes many things, including life, death, strength, change, healing, dreaming, and unconditional love. Depending on the conditions and clearness, water could also represent both good and bad health. The specific meaning of water's symbolism varies from tribe to tribe. So I thought that tied in really well with her bathing in this lake, because obviously it is healing and life-changing for her. And After she's done bathing in the lake, the invisible being gives the rough-faced girl the finest buckskin robes and a necklace of perfect shells. Who represents the fairy godmother? So, like I had said earlier, there is no fairy godmother in this book. The actual prince or invisible being could possibly represent the fairy godmother in some type of way because he gave her back what she did not think was possible, which was, I guess, living in happiness and having her physical appearance back. And he clothed her with the finest Native American attire. What is the ball? So there is no ball in this story either. There is no celebration or party that happens. At the end of the book, it mentions that they end up married, and they live together in great gladness and were never parted. So how has the illustrator presented the culture through the use of art elements? I believe, or I think that in this book, he used striking illustrations by drawing strong, distinctive, and unique pictures to portray the characters. But I noticed he really emphasized strongly on the beauty of the Native American attire, like in this picture, whenever it shows these two sisters. I feel like the illustrator did a really, really good job drawing Native American jewelry and attire and just how beautiful it can be. It was also interesting to see the shade and shadow of the illustrations whenever it shows the invisible being. Like I keep referring to this picture, but you never really get a good look at his face, which I thought was kind of interesting. It kind of keeps it mysterious, but the page is really, really dark. You can kind of get a glimpse of him, but I thought that was also pretty neat that the illustrator just kind of kept him mysterious, I guess. Okay. And then how do the illustrations support literary elements? I think the illustrator also did a fantastic job of portraying the story through use of picture. It felt as though you're in the story with the rough-faced girl. You can feel her pain whenever her older sisters make her sit by the fire. The pictures gradually to help in developing the story and indicating the plot for its readers to understand the story properly. Okay, so we are going to go on to our last book, which is the Egyptian Cinderella. This was also a great representation of the classic Cinderella book. The cultural setting in this one, it takes place in Egypt by the Green Nile River. The culture is of Egyptian ethnicity. The time period in this book, it also just mentions in the beginning long ago. But if it were around the time of like pharaohs, which we'll get to later, we can guess that it takes place around maybe the 1st century, so a really long time ago. Who is Cinderella in the story? So the character's name in the story is Rhodopis. Rhodopis did not look like the other Egyptian girls, as you can see right here. The other Egyptian girls, you know, they have brown eyes and dark hair and copper-colored skin. And here Rhodopis has green eyes, light hair, and fair skin. The book actually mentions pale skin that burned red beneath the sun, which is how she got her name Rhodopis, because Rhodopis means rosy-cheeked in Greek. She was a slave girl, and the other Egyptian girls were servants, so they ordered her about to do everything around the house, just like the original Cinderella story, ordering her to do all their, you know, household chores and outside chores. Rhodopis was kind and found friends among the animals with her lovely voice and dancing, as you can see right here. She's got all sorts of animals around her, kind of like in the original Cinderella when she makes friends with those little mice and everything around her. What represents the gown and how does it represent the gown? So there is no gown in this story for Rhodopis because she does not attend any type of gathering or ball later on in the story. The other Egyptian girls dressed their finest to meet the pharaoh, but Rhodopis gets left behind. Here's a picture of the other Egyptian girls right here on their way to meet the pharaoh. Pharaoh Amasis, he was holding court for his subjects. However, the shoes and the slippers, the next question, represent a great deal in this book, which is the next question, what represents the shoe? Rhodopis' master sees her one night dancing. We'll go back to this page. Among the animals, and thought she was so beautiful, he wanted to gift her the gift, a reward of dainty slippers made specially for her. The soles were made of real leather, and the toes were gilded with rose red gold. When Rhodopis danced, her feet sparkled like fireflies, it mentions in the book. Here you can see that she's actually dancing barefoot, and then her master sees her dancing and wanted to give her the gift of those sparkly shoes so she wouldn't have to dance barefoot anymore. The cultural significance is that most Egyptians actually went barefoot. Even the pharaohs, they didn't wear shoes a lot back then. Egypt actually has almost no record of the use of footwear. So when Rhodopis' shoes were made of rose red gold, gold itself in Egypt indicates godliness, wealth, purity, and prestige. So this made her really, really special, incredibly special. And the other girls were, it actually mentions the other Egyptian girls were jealous of her, as if they had any reason to hate her more. What or who represents the stepmother? So there's no stepmother in this book either. It is the 3 Egyptian girls that represent the stepmother. It only actually mentions one of them by name, Kippa, which it mentions that she is the chief among them. They are all uppity and thought very highly of themselves while being wicked girls to Rhodopis. They would scoff at her, bully her, shout her orders to take care of everything around the house. They were jealous of her whenever she got those rose red slippers, like I had mentioned, because the shoes that they had worn were only made out of, it says they were clumsy sandals woven from papyrus. What or who represents the prince? Let me get to that page so you guys can see him. Here he is. The prince is a pharaoh. His name is Amasis. The story mentions him wearing a double crown that was heavy and pinched his ears. I looked up the cultural reference or significance of this crown, and the double crown worn by rulers in Egypt, it is worn by rulers in Egypt. The ancient Egyptians generally referred to it as a skahemti, the 2 powerful ones. So the combining red and white of the crown, the white represents the upper Egypt and the red represents the lower Egypt. It mentions that Amasis was bored when holding court and preferred driving the chariot as fast as the wind could, driving the chariot as fast as the wind to sitting on this throne. So he's obviously bored holding this court, and he's complaining about how heavy that crown is on top of his head. What or who represents the magic? So there is no magic in this story either. However, this great falcon right here, which is a symbol of the god Horus, circled in the sky above Rhodopis' shoes when she set them carefully on the water bank behind her after she had finished washing them. He snatches up one of her shoes, and the falcon later drops it on Pharaoh Amasis' lap, which Pharaoh says that the god Horus sends me a sign. he sees it as a sign from the gods. So he later says, whoever can fit this shoe is who I am going to marry. So I guess the bird can kind of portray some type of magic just because he's represented as a god, and if it weren't for him, he wouldn't have found Rhodopis. Amethyst wouldn't have found Rhodopis. Who represents the fairy godmother? So there is no fairy godmother in this story either. I suppose the falcon could represent it in some type of way because Amethyst seen it as a sign from God that he dropped the slipper onto his lap. What is the ball? There is no ball in this book either. There's only a court holding that is held by Pharaoh Amethyst, but Rhodopis does not get to attend this because the other Egyptian girls left her behind. The cultural significance is the ancient Egyptians, excuse me, record shows that they did have a court system. Supreme High Court judges were pharaohs who were assigned a vizier to this job to hear the case and act as a judge. Since he now has her shoe, he journeys to distant cities, tracked the deserts, and climbed the steepest cliffs to find her. So the illustrations in this book, how do they represent the culture through art elements? I think the author did a wonderful job representing the art elements, like the use of the color and line. Each color in Egypt actually has a different meaning, which I would have included in this presentation, but that probably would have taken up an hour alone. But like I said, each color represents something different in the Egyptian culture. I also noticed the bold lines on the Egyptian servant girl's makeup. You can actually see it on Rhodopis right here too. Egyptians are known obviously for their beautiful makeup like this. They use a malachite powder, a green type mineral for their eye makeup. Galena was a black paint that shielded their eyes, which was, galena can be known as some like a substance or a material kind of like coal, which gives them this beautiful look. So how do the illustrations represent the culture? Oh, no, I already answered that, I'm sorry. How do they support literary elements? So I think the illustrator also did a good job supporting literary elements because you can easily depict who the hero is in this book, or the heroine, which is Rhodopis. The magic or help that is portrayed, which is the falcon, because he drops Rhodopis' shoe on Amethyst's lap. The villains of the story, which is obviously the three Egyptian girls. Royalty, which is Pharaoh Amethyst, and their happily ever after, which shows in the very, very back. I don't even think I showed you guys. Here. They end up together, and actually Amethyst says that he does a really good job of making her feel like she really is Egyptian, because he says she is the most Egyptian of all. Her eyes are as green as the Nile, her hair is as feathery as papyrus, and her skin is as pink as the lotus flower, which you can see all these different illustrations that he's explaining is all the colors and surroundings that is around them. The pictures gradually help in developing the story and indicating the plot for its readers to understand it properly. And that is it. That is my Cinderella book presentation. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks.